The day the piece ended was the day Arthur Finch climbed the Harmony Creek water tower with a can of red spray paint and a hunting rifle. I saw him up there, a black speck against the impossibly blue Arizona sky. Down below, Sheriff Brody was trying to talk him down through a bullhorn, but his voice was tinny and lost in the dry wind. I was on my way to the hub, my lunchbox in hand, same as any other Tuesday. The hub was the town's connection to the chorus, the great gift from the Luminians. The gift that had ended all war, all famine, all strife. The gift that let us share in the most perfect moments, a collective consciousness of joy. I was a memory technician. It was my job to help people connect, to fine-tune their experiences. It was a good job, a peaceful job. They're thieves. Arthur's voice, raw and real, somehow carried farther than the bullhorn. Thieves in the light. They're stealing the attic of your mind, board by board, and you are thanking them for the firewood. People were murmuring. A few folks chuckled the way you do at a town eccentric. Arthur had always been odd. A retired history teacher who refused to plug into the chorus. Said it made his teeth ache. Most people just thought he was a sad old man, clinging to a past no one wanted anymore. A past of pain and grief, and all the sharp-edged things the Luminians had promised to smooth away. "What's he on about, Jake?" my neighbor Mrs. Gable asked me. Her face was serene, her eyes holding the faint, placid glow of a shared memory she was probably enjoying from the chorus. A perfect morning on a Parisian balcony, maybe, or the thrill of cresting the first hill on a roller coaster. Just Arthur being Arthur, I said, but a cold knot was tightening in my gut. I remembered Arthur from before the Luminians came. He'd taught me history. He'd had a laugh that sounded like rocks in a tumbler. Now his voice was just a scream. "They're not giving you peace," Arthur shrieked, and I saw him scrawl something on the water tower in big red letters. A single word, Rema Bummer. "They're giving you a void. A pretty sunlit void. They're hollering you out." Then he did it. He put the rifle to his head. The sound wasn't as loud as I'd expected. It was a flat, ugly pop, a period at the end of a messy sentence. Arthur Finch, the man who remembered too much, tumbled from the tower and became a broken thing on the baked earth. The crowd gasped. A collective, singular sound. For a moment, just a moment, the placid glow in their eyes flickered. Real shock, real horror. It was a feeling we hadn't had in a decade. It was messy. It was human. Then, almost as one, they closed their eyes. I could feel it. The silent, desperate rush to the chorus. To wash this ugly moment away. With a shared memory of a child's laughter. Or the taste of the first strawberry of summer. But I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at the red word on the tower. Remember, my hands were shaking, because for the last few weeks, I'd been having trouble doing just that. My wife, Sarah, has been gone for 12 years. I used to be able to recall the exact shade of her eyes when she was angry, the little scar above her left eyebrow. Now, when I tried, the image was blurry, like a photograph left out in the sun. And sometimes, for a terrifying second, it would be replaced by the face of a woman from a popular chorus memory. A beautiful, generic woman I had never met. Arthur Finch didn't climb that tower because he was crazy. He climbed it because he was the only one who was still sane. And that was the most terrifying thought I'd ever had. The peace treaty wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. And we had all welcomed it with open arms. The hub was a quiet place, all cool air and soft humming light. It smelled of ozone and clean plastic. My station was in the back, a small cubicle with a monitor that showed the town's chorus traffic. Green lines pulsed rhythmically, showing the flow of shared experiences. After Arthur's public suicide, the lines were pulsing faster than ever. A frantic flood of data, as the good people of Harmony Creek drowned the ugly memory in a tide of curated bliss. I sat down, my lunchbox feeling heavy on my lap. The sandwich inside was probably warm and mushy by now. I couldn't eat. Arthur's final word, "remember," was burned onto the back of my eyelids. My job was simple. People would come in with connection issues, or they'd want to access a specific tier of memory. The premium tier, for instance, offered experiences crafted by the Luminians themselves. Flying through the rings of a gas giant, composing a symphony in a single night. Most people loved it. They called it upgrading their happiness. Old man Hemlock came in around noon. He was a sweet guy, ran the hardware store for 50 years. He sat in the client chair, his face a little slack. "Jake," he said, his voice soft, "I am having a problem with the fishing trip." "The Lake Anawanda trip from all 7, I asked, pulling up the memory file. It was a community favorite. A perfect day of fishing, shared by a dozen people who were actually there, then polished and uploaded for everyone to enjoy. "That's the one," he said. "It's just I can't seem to recall who I went with. I know I was there. I can feel the sun on my neck. I can smell the worms, but the faces are blank." I typed a few commands. The memory's core data was stable. The sensory inputs were at 100%. The emotional resonance was a perfect 9.8, calibrated for nostalgic contentment. But when I pulled up the personnel manifest, I saw the problem. The slots for companions were filled with generic avatars. Standard male 1, standard male 2. "The file seems to have been compressed for efficiency, Mr. Hemlock," I lied. It was the standard explanation. Sometimes, to make a memory more universally accessible, non-essential personal data is smoothed over. He nodded slowly, but his brow was furrowed. "But my brother Tom, he was on that trip. He passed away 2 years later. It was one of my last good days with him. I wanted to see his face again." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Can you unsmooth it?" I felt that cold knot in my gut again, colder this time. I knew I couldn't. That data wasn't compressed, it was gone, replaced. The chorus didn't just share memories, it curated them. It took a real, messy, personal memory, with its inside jokes and quiet sadnesses, and it turned it into a theme park ride. It sanded off the splinters. Tom's face was a splinter. "I am sorry, Mr. Hemlock," I said, my own voice sounding hollow. "The original file is locked. It's part of the peace accord, to prevent painful associations." He just sat there for a long time, then he nodded and stood up. "Okay, Jake, thank you." He walked out, his shoulders a little more stooped than when he came in. He had come here looking for his dead brother, and left with a perfectly rendered, universally accessible, completely empty fishing trip. A ghost of a memory. I turned back to my screen and, on a whim, typed in my own private access code. I navigated to my personal memory archive. A small, walled-off section of the chorus I used to store things for myself and my daughter Lily. I pulled up my favorite memory of Sarah. It was from our honeymoon. We were on a beach in Mexico. She was laughing, her head thrown back, the wind whipping her hair across her face. The memory loaded. The sound of the waves was perfect. The warmth of the sun felt real. But her face, Teva, was blurry, not just a little blurry. It was indistinct, like a watercolor painting left in the rain. And her laugh. It wasn't her laugh. It was a beautiful, melodious laugh, but it wasn't the slightly goofy, snorting laugh that I had fallen in love with. It was the laugh from the perfect wedding day premium experience. I slammed my fist on the desk. The monitor flickered. They had gotten in. Even into my private files. They were taking her from me piece by piece, replacing my Sarah with their cheap hollow copies. Arthur wasn't just rambling. He was a prophet screaming in the wilderness. They were hollowing us out, and I was one of the people holding the shovel. The building was dark except for one window, where a yellow light spilled out onto the dusty parking lot. Sheriff Brody was a good man but a tired one. He'd been sheriff for 20 years, and the arrival of the Luminians and the chorus had basically made his job obsolete. Crime had plummeted to near zero. People didn't fight when they could log into a shared memory of resolving a conflict peacefully. He mostly just handled stray dogs and traffic glitches now. Arthur's death was the first real police work he'd had to do in a decade. He looked up when I came in, his eyes red-rimmed. A half-empty bottle of whiskey stood on his desk next to a cardboard box labeled Finch, A. Evidence. "Jake," he said, his voice gravelly. "Shouldn't you be at home, enjoying some manufactured bliss like the rest of the town?" "Couldn't," I said, pulling up a chair. "I can't stop thinking about what he said." Brody sighed and poured a splash of whiskey into a coffee mug. He slid it across the desk to me. I didn't drink, but I took it. The ravings of a lunatic, son. That's the official Luminian statement. The poor man was suffering from pre-accord trauma and refused the therapeutic benefits of the chorus. A tragic, but isolated, incident. He said it like he was reading a press release. "You don't believe that," I said, looking at the box. He took a long swallow from his own mug. "What I believe doesn't much matter anymore, does it? The Luminians declared the case closed. Said any further investigation would cause unnecessary social friction." He snorted. "Unnecessary social friction. That's what they call a man blowing his brains out in front of the whole town." "What's in the box, Sheriff?" He stared at it for a moment. The usual. Wallet, keys, a can of red paint, and this. He reached in and pulled out a thick, leather-bound journal. It was worn and stained, the kind of thing nobody used anymore. He tossed it on the desk. He was a writer, you know, kept a journal his whole life. This is his last one. My heart started beating faster. "Did you read it?" "Tried to," Brody said, rubbing his face. "It's mostly nonsense. Talking about memory echoes and blank spots. Says the chorus is a psychic parasite that feeds on authenticity. Said he could feel it nibbling at the edges of his life. Called it the Great Forgetting." The Great Forgetting. The words sent a chill down my spine. It was exactly what I had felt, what Mr. Hemlock had felt, the slow creeping erasure. "Can I see it?" I asked. Brody looked at me, his gaze sharp and searching. He saw the desperation in my eyes. He saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Fear, real fear. Not the manufactured thrill of a chorus horror experience, but the cold, gut-level terror of a man who suspects the world is built on a lie. He pushed the journal toward me. "It's evidence. You can't take it with you." I opened it. Arthur's handwriting was a spidery, frantic scrawl. The first few pages were normal enough, complaining about the weather, the price of coffee. But then it changed. The 12th of October. Tried to remember my third-grade teacher's name today. Mrs. Sells it is Mrs. Ear. It was right there. Now it's gone. Just a hole. A perfectly shaped hole where a memory used to be. The chorus offered me a generic, kindly teacher memory to fill it. I refused. I'd rather have the hole. The 3rd of November. They are getting bolder. Margaret Gable asked me about the town picnic of '98. I was there. I remember the checkered blanket. But when I told her about the big thunderstorm that rolled in and soaked everyone, she just smiled. Said she remembered a perfect sunny day. I checked the chorus. The official memory of that picnic is a perfect sunny day. They stole our rain. They stole our goddamn rain. The 1st of December. It's a digestive system. I see it now. The Luminians aren't giving us memories. They're feeding. They consume our real, complex, vibrant experiences. The good, the bad, the bittersweet. And they excrete these bland, simple, generic ones. We are living on recycled, processed emotions. We are battery hens, and our souls are the eggs. I looked up from the page, my hands trembling. This wasn't a madman's diary. It was a field report from the front line of a war nobody else knew was being fought. He wasn't crazy, I whispered. Sheriff Brody stared into his mug. No, he said, his voice barely audible. He wasn't. Now, what in the hell are we going to do about it? I drove home under a sky full of stars that seemed colder and more distant than usual. The Luminians had come from out there, from that endless black. They had arrived in ships that looked like teardrops of solid light, preaching a gospel of unity and peace. Humanity, fractured and weary from its own petty conflicts, had knelt in gratitude. We had given them the keys to our minds in exchange for a quiet life. Arthur's journal sat heavy in my mind, its words echoing with a terrible clarity. They stole our rain. When I got home, the lights were low. My daughter Lily was asleep on the couch, her favorite worn-out stuffed bear clutched in her arms. Maria, my sitter, a sweet girl of 19, was dozing in the armchair, her head tilted back, the faint, familiar glow of the chorus in her half-closed eyes. She was probably walking on a moon with low gravity, a popular teen experience. I paid her quietly and she drifted out the door, still half lost in her lunar dreamscape. I knelt by the couch and brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. She was 7. Her whole world had been shaped by the chorus. Her bedtime stories were often interactive memories of friendly, talking animals. Her history lessons were sanitized tours of great human achievements, with all the struggle and bloodshed edited out. I had thought it was a blessing to shield her from the ugliness of the past. Now I saw it for what it was. I was raising her in a beautiful, comfortable cage, and she didn't even know the bars were there. I picked her up and carried her to her room. She stirred in my arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy," she mumbled, "I had a new dream." "Oh yes, sweetie, what was it?" I asked, laying her down in her bed and tucking the covers around her. "I was flying," she said, her voice full of sleepy wonder. "With my new friend, we flew over the big mountains with the snow." "Your new friend?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Who's that?" "Elara," Lily said. "She's a Luminian. She showed me how they fly. It doesn't even feel like falling." My blood ran cold. The Luminians were interacting with our children directly through the chorus, not just providing curated memories, but actively engaging with them, grooming them. "That's for a noise, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But listen, can you tell me something? Do you remember the story I told you about Mommy? About the time we went to the zoo and the monkey stole her hat? It was our story. A real story. A silly, specific, messy memory that was mine and Sarah's alone. I had told it to Lily 100 times. Lily scrunched up her face in concentration. The monkey, he took her hat, she said slowly. And she laughed. She had a pretty laugh. That's right, I said, relieved. What did the hat look like? Do you remember the color? She thought for a moment. It was blue, she said. A pretty blue. Like the sky in the perfect day at the park memory. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. No, sweetie, I said, my voice cracking. No, it wasn't. It was a big, floppy, yellow hat. She called it her ridiculous sun hat. Don't you remember? Lily looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. No, Daddy, it was blue. She said it with such certainty. The chorus memory, bright and polished, and reinforced by a million other users, was stronger than my messy, unverified truth. The lie was overwriting the reality in my own daughter's mind. They were stealing my wife from my child, replacing her with a stock photo. I felt a surge of rage so pure and hot it almost made me dizzy. This was not peace. This was conquest. The quietest, most insidious invasion in the history of the universe. They weren't using bombs and lasers. They were using our own memories against us. They were conquering us from the inside out. I kissed Lily's forehead. Her skin was warm and real. Go to sleep, sweetie, I whispered. Everything's going to be okay. It was a lie. But it was my lie. Not theirs, and I would be damned if I let them take anything else. As I stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, I made a decision. My war started tonight. First thing tomorrow, I was unplugging my house. We were going off the grid. The great forgetting would not have my daughter. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was still, filled with that gray pre-light silence. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then the weight of what I knew, of what I had to do, settled back onto my shoulders. The chorus receiver for our house was in the basement, a sleek, silver box mounted to the wall. It was a Luminian device, humming softly, its single blue light pulsing like a calm heartbeat. It was the electronic umbilical cord that fed our home, a constant stream of curated peace and joy. It had to go. I grabbed a heavy wrench from my toolbox. Standing in front of the receiver, I hesitated. This was a bigger step than just thinking about the problem. This was an act of rebellion, an act of blasphemy against the new gods. People didn't unplug. It was considered a form of self-harm, like refusing food or water. I thought of Lily's certainty that Sarah's hat was blue. I thought of Mr. Hemlock's lost brother. I thought of Arthur's body hitting the ground. I swung the wrench. The sound of metal crunching plastic was obscenely loud in the quiet basement. The blue light flickered and died. The hum ceased. A sudden profound silence fell over the house. It was more than just the absence of a sound. It was the absence of a presence. The low-level psychic background noise I hadn't even realized was suddenly gone. My own thoughts felt louder, sharper, somehow more my own. A dull headache began to throb behind my eyes. Withdrawal. I went upstairs. Lily was still asleep. I started making breakfast the old way from scratch. Real eggs, real bacon. Not the nutrient paste we usually had, which was easy and efficient, but tasted of nothing. The smell of frying bacon filled the kitchen. It was a smell from my own childhood, a messy, greasy, wonderful smell. It was a memory trigger, and for the first time in a long time, the memory it triggered was crystal clear. My own father standing at the stove on a Saturday morning, wearing a ridiculous apron. When Lily came into the kitchen, she was rubbing her eyes. "My head feels funny, Daddy," she said. "And it's too quiet." "I know, sweetie," I said, placing a plate of eggs in front of her. "The house's chorus is broken. I have to fix it. We'll have to make our own fun today." She looked at the food with suspicion. "What is it?" "It's called breakfast," I said, a sad smile on my face. The first few hours were rough. Lily was irritable and bored. She kept asking if she could go see her friend Ilara. I had to tell her the network was down. She complained that there were no stories in her head. The silence was unnerving for both of us. The house felt empty. We had forgotten how to simply be with ourselves in our own minds. To distract her, I pulled out an old dusty box from the attic. It was filled with photo albums, real ones with printed pictures stuck to adhesive pages. "What are those?" Lily asked, poking at the plastic film. "This is us," I said, opening one. "This is our memory book." I showed her pictures of her as a baby. Pictures of me and Sarah, young and goofy, and there it was. A picture from the zoo trip. Sarah, squinting in the sun, wearing a huge, floppy, bright yellow hat. Lily stared at it. "But I remember it was blue," she whispered, her brow furrowed in confusion. "The chorus remembers it was blue," I corrected her gently. "This is the truth. See? It was yellow. Your mom loved this ridiculous hat." She reached out a small finger and touched the picture, tracing the outline of the yellow hat. "Yellow?" she said softly, a small, simple word. But in the quiet of our unplugged house, it felt like a victory. A tiny piece of reality reclaimed from the great placid lie. Later that afternoon, the headache behind my eyes sharpened. The silence in my head was no longer just quiet. It was screaming. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a craving for the effortless connection of the chorus. It was a drug, and my body and mind were screaming for a fix. I found myself wanting to just give in, to plug it all back in and sink into the warm bath of shared bliss. Then I looked at Lily. She was on the floor with the photo album spread around her, completely absorbed. She was asking me questions. Who was this person? Where was this picture taken? She was excavating her own past, our past. She was learning to remember. I knew then that I could never go back. I would endure the withdrawal. I would live in the screaming silence. Because the silence was the price of being real. And I had to teach my daughter the difference between the peace of a graveyard and the messy, noisy, difficult, beautiful chaos of being alive. 2 days after I unplugged my house, the Luminian came. It arrived without a sound. One moment I was washing dishes, looking out the kitchen window at the dry brown yard. The next, it was standing on my porch. It hadn't walked up the path. It had simply appeared. The Luminians rarely showed themselves in person. They preferred to communicate through the chorus or via holographic proxies. A physical visit was unheard of. It was like a god descending from the heavens to check on a faulty prayer. It was beautiful, of course. They were always beautiful. It stood about 7 feet tall, impossibly slender, with skin that shimmered like mother of pearl. It had no discernible face, just a smooth, ovoid head that tilted with an unnerving bird-like curiosity. It wore no clothes, but light seemed to bend around its form like a garment. Its presence was overwhelming, exuding a sense of ancient calm that felt both awe-inspiring and deeply predatory. I dried my hands on my pants, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sent Lily to her room, telling her to stay there and play with her old toys until I came for her. She went without protest, sensing the gravity in my voice. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice sounding thin and weak. A voice spoke, not from the creature, but directly inside my head. It was a chorus of 1,000 gentle voices, all speaking in perfect harmony. "Jacob Miller, we have detected an anomaly at this residence, a disconnection." The headache from my chorus withdrawal, which had subsided to a dull throb, flared up with a vengeance in the creature's presence. It was like standing next to a massive psychic amplifier. "The receiver's broken," I said, trying to keep my thoughts focused. It was hard. The Luminian's mental voice was soothing, persuasive. It made you want to agree with whatever it said. "Disconnection is a form of suffering, Jacob," the voice whispered in my mind. "It breeds isolation, anxiety, fear. The very states your species struggled with for millennia. We brought you the gift of unity, the gift of peace. Why would you choose to suffer?" "I like the quiet," I said, leaning against the door frame for support. The Luminian tilted its head. I had the sense of being scanned, analyzed, my motives and fears laid bare. "You are experiencing memory corruption. Your recollections of your deceased mate, Sarah, are degrading. This is a common symptom of disconnection. The chorus protects and preserves cherished memories. It keeps them perfect. By cutting yourself off, you are letting her fade away." It was a brilliant, cruel tactic. It was offering me the one thing I wanted most, to have my memories of Sarah back, clear and whole. It was offering me a beautiful, polished version of her, free of pain and loss. The version I had already seen, with the wrong laugh. "The version in the chorus isn't her," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and grief. "It's a copy, a fake. You took her laugh." The light around the Luminian seemed to pulse, a slow, deliberate rhythm. "We do not take, we refine. We remove the discordant notes to create a more harmonious symphony. Pain, grief, loss. These are discordant notes. They create friction. They lead to conflict. We have freed you from this. We have given you a world without sharp edges." "A life without sharp edges isn't a life," I shot back, emboldened by my anger. "It's a waiting room. My memories, the real ones, they're mine, the good parts and the bad parts. The yellow hat and the arguments we had and the way she looked right at the end. It's all mine. You don't have the right to refine it." For the first time, I felt a shift in the Luminian psychic presence. The overwhelming calm was momentarily replaced by something else. Something cold and vast and utterly indifferent. It was the feeling of an ant trying to explain its worldview to a boot. "The accord your leaders signed was absolute," the voice in my head stated. It was no longer gentle. It was flat, hard, a statement of unchangeable fact. Your species was on the brink of self-annihilation. You were a symphony of screams. We brought you silence. We brought you peace. The price of that peace is the curation of your collective consciousness. It is a small price." It took a step closer, its form seeming to block out the sun. "Reconnect to the chorus, Jacob Miller. For your own well-being. And for the well-being of your offspring, Lily. She is young. Her mind is pliable. Do not condemn her to the chaos of an uncurated existence. It was a threat, cloaked in the language of concern. Rejoin the flock, or we will take your child. My fear was gone, burned away by a cold, hard certainty. I looked past the shimmering creature at the quiet, peaceful street, at the neighbors who were probably enjoying a perfect memory of a non-existent beach, and I felt a profound sense of pity for them. They were safe, they were happy, and they were slaves. "Get off my property," I said. My voice didn't shake, my thoughts were my own. The Luminian stood there for a long moment. The pressure in my head was immense. It was trying to force its way in to make me obey. I held on to the image of Sarah's real goofy laugh. I held on to the memory of Lily touching the photo of the yellow hat. I held on with everything I had. Then, as silently as it arrived, it was gone. The pressure vanished. The sunlight seemed normal again. I was left standing in my doorway, drenched in sweat, my head screaming in pain. But I had won. I had faced the god of peace and told it no. I knew with chilling certainty that it would be back, and it would not be asking so politely next time. The Luminian's visit left me with two things: a splitting headache and the certain knowledge that I was on a clock. They had tried persuasion. Next would come force. I couldn't fight them alone. Arthur's journal was my only lead. In his frantic final entries he had mentioned others. People who felt the nibbling. People who preferred the holes. He gave no names, only cryptic clues. The woman who guards the silent words. The soldier who remembers the real noise of war. The boy who sees the code behind the curtain. I started with the most obvious clue. The woman who guards the silent words. The Harmony Creek Public Library. It was a sad, forgotten place. In the age of the chorus, where any book could be downloaded directly into your mind as a full sensory experience, the physical library was an antique. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light slanting through the tall windows. The air smelled of old paper and decaying glue. It smelled wonderful. A woman with sharp eyes and graying hair piled high on her head sat behind the main desk, reading a thick, hardbound book. She looked up as I entered, her expression one of surprise. She probably hadn't had a visitor in a week. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her name was Eleanor Vance. I remembered her from before. She had always seemed severe and a little sad. "I am looking for a book," I said, walking toward the desk. "About local history. Something unofficial." She closed her book, her finger marking her place. "The chorus has a comprehensive and fully authenticated archive of local history," she said, her tone flat. "It's much more efficient." "I am not looking for efficient," I said, leaning closer. "I am looking for the truth. I am looking for the rainstorm at the 98 picnic." Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something, fear, recognition, passed across her face before she masked it. "I don't know what you are talking about." "Arthur Finch sent me," I lied. "Before he died. He said you were a rememberer." Eleanor stared at me for a long, silent moment. She scanned the empty library, then looked back at me, her gaze piercing. "Arthur was a fool," she said, but there was no venom in her words, only sorrow. "He was too loud. You don't fight the ocean by shouting at it." "So you just let it drown you?" I asked. "No," she said softly. "You build an ark." She stood and beckoned for me to follow her into the stacks, into a back room filled with discarded, damaged books. She ran her hand along a shelf. They started with the books years ago. Little changes. A paragraph here, the character's motivation there. Refining, they called it. Making the stories more harmonious. They took the anger out of Steinbeck. They took the despair out of Orwell, I noticed. No one else did. They were too busy experiencing the new, happy versions. She pulled a book from the shelf. It was a copy of a local history she had written herself 20 years ago. They even came for this one. In the official chorus archive, the chapter on the miners' strike of the 1930s is now about a town-wide festival of cooperation. They didn't just steal our memories. They stole our history. A man emerged from the shadows of the stacks. He was lean and wiry with a hard face and tattoos coiling up his arms. "You are being careless, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rasp. His eyes locked onto me, cold and assessing. "This is the soldier," Eleanor said to me. "Marcus. He remembers the real noise of war." "I remember what it sounds like when a man dies," Marcus said, his gaze never leaving mine. "It's not a harmonious chord of resolved conflict, like in the damn chorus simulations. It's a gurgle. It's a scream. They're trying to make us forget that too. Make us forget the cost of things." Another figure appeared, a kid no older than 16, with a laptop covered in stickers under his arm. "The local network traffic is spiking," the kid said, not looking at me. "Someone's running a search algorithm for unplugged residences." "That's you, I bet. You are loud." "And this is Ben," Eleanor said. "The boy who sees the code behind the curtain." Ben finally looked at me. "The chorus isn't just a network, it's an operating system. For people. And you, man, you are a blue screen of death." "A Luminian came to my house," I told them. "It threatened my daughter." The atmosphere in the room changed. The quiet academic discussion was over. This was real. Marcus cracked his knuckles. They'd never been that direct before. They're getting nervous or impatient. "They're consolidating the network," Ben said, tapping on his laptop. "Purging old, unaccessed private memory files to free up processing power. It's an extinction event. A digital book burning." "The Great Forgetting," I whispered, the phrase from Arthur's journal coming back to me. "Exactly," Eleanor said, her face grim. "They are erasing every trace of who we used to be. Soon, the only history, the only memory, the only truth left will be the one they created for us. We will be a species with amnesia, happy in our ignorance. It will be the end of humanity, and no one will even be around to remember it happening." We stood there in the dusty back room of a forgotten library, the last remnants of a forgotten world. The weight of what we were up against felt crushing, impossible. We were 4 people against a galaxy-spanning intelligence that held the minds of billions in its gentle, loving, suffocating grip. "So what do we do?" I asked, looking at each of them. "How do you fight a god?" Marcus looked at the kid. The kid looked at the librarian. Finally, Eleanor looked at me. "Arthur thought the only way was to make a lot of noise," she said. He was right about the noise. He was just wrong about the method. You can't wake people up by screaming at them from a water tower. You have to scream inside their heads. We gathered in the library's basement, a cramped, musty space surrounded by centuries of forgotten words. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows that made our small group seem even smaller. The plan we formulated was desperate, audacious, and likely suicidal. It was the only plan we had. "We can't destroy the chorus," Ben said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. His laptop was connected to an ancient dial-up modem line. A connection so archaic, it was completely off the Luminians' radar. "The infrastructure is too integrated. The hardware is everywhere, in every home, every building. It's like trying to destroy the internet by smashing one computer." "And we can't fight them physically," Marcus added, cleaning a well-oiled hunting knife with a rag. It was more a nervous habit than a practical task. They're post-physical beings or something close to it. Trying to shoot a Lumenian would be like trying to punch a sunbeam. "So we don't attack the hardware or the enemy," Eleanor said, pacing the small space. "We attack the idea. The Trojan horse wasn't defeated by breaking down its wooden walls. It was defeated by what came out of it. You need to put something inside the chorus. Something they can't control. Something that will undo their work from the inside." "A virus," I said. Ben shook his head. "Their firewalls are perfect. They're quantum-entangled algorithms that anticipate any attack before it's launched. No code I could write would ever get through." "Not a computer virus," Eleanor corrected me, her eyes gleaming with a fierce intelligence. "A memory virus, a psychic bomb." We all looked at her. "The chorus works by providing sanitized, harmonious experiences," she explained. "It's a diet of sugar. The human mind, the human soul, can't live on sugar alone. It needs salt. It needs bitterness. It needs protein. It needs the full, messy spectrum of experience to be healthy. The Luminians are starving us. And we're thanking them for it, because we've forgotten what a real meal tastes like." "So we give them a real meal," Marcus growled, getting it. "Exactly," Eleanor said. "We find a memory, a single, powerful, undeniable memory. Something so profoundly, painfully human that it will cut through the fog of the chorus like a knife. It can't be a happy memory. Their system would just absorb and sanitize that. It has to be something they can't process. Something discordant. Something with sharp edges." We were all silent for a moment, contemplating the idea. What memory would be strong enough? "The memory of a battle," Marcus suggested. "The fear, the noise, the chaos, the real thing." "The memory of loss," Eleanor offered. "The specific gut-wrenching grief of losing someone you love without any of the chorus's therapeutic filters." "The memory of a hard truth," Ben added quietly. "That moment you realize something you believed in is a lie." "It needs to be all of them," I said, the plan crystallizing in my mind. A collage, a montage of everything they tried to make us forget. We can't just upload one memory. We need to create a new one. A weaponized memory. Ben looked up from his laptop. Theoretically, it's possible, but we'd need a direct, high-bandwidth connection to a primary hub. And we'd need someone with technician-level access codes to open a port, long enough to inject a raw, uncurated data stream. All eyes turned to me. I was the memory technician. I had the codes. My hib, the one in the center of Harmony Creek, was a primary conduit for the entire state. "They'll be watching you," Marcus warned. "After that visit, your name is at the top of their list." "They'll be watching for me to reconnect," I said. "They won't expect me to walk into the heart of their system and try to burn it down." The plan was this. Ben would use his skills to package the memory virus, a raw data file containing a layered sequence of unfiltered human experience. Marcus and Eleanor would create a diversion on the other side of town. A physical disruption, something loud and messy enough to draw the attention of the local authorities and, hopefully, the Luminians' automated security systems. That would give me a window. A few minutes, maybe less, to get into the hub, access the central server, and upload our psychic bomb. "What memories do we use?" I asked. Marcus looked distant. "I have a few I've been trying to drink away for 20 years. They can have them." Eleanor nodded. "I have the memory of my father's funeral, the real one. Before the chorus tried to convince me it was a celebration of his harmonious transition." Ben looked down at his keyboard. "I remember finding out my parents' perfect, chorus-assisted marriage was a sham. They couldn't even stand to be in the same room without being plugged in. And I had mine. The sharpest, most painful memory of all. The memory of sitting by Sarah's hospital bed holding her hand as she slipped away. The beeping machines, the antiseptic smell, the terrible final silence. It was the memory I had run from for years, the one I had let the chorus dull and blur. But it was the most real thing I had. It was the core of my grief, and therefore the core of my love for her. It was my sharpest edge. We would combine them, war, grief, betrayal, and loss. A symphony of screams, as the Luminian had called us. We would give them back their symphony at full volume. We would remind humanity what it felt like to be human, even if the feeling was unbearable. It was our only hope. The night of the plan was starless and cold. A dry wind blew through Harmony Creek, kicking up dust and rattling street signs. The town was asleep, but it was a false sleep, a collective dream powered by the humming silver boxes in their basements. We synchronized our cheap, old-fashioned watches in the library's basement. 10 minutes, Marcus said, his face set like stone. "I can give you 10 minutes max, then you are on your own." He and Eleanor were heading for the old power substation on the west side of town. Their diversion was a series of controlled explosions designed to cause a blackout. A physical problem the Luminian psychic security couldn't just smooth over. Ben handed me a small gray data chip. "It's all on there," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The memories, Marcus's war, Eleanor's grief, my the family stuff, and yours." I wrapped it in a recursive loop. Once it's in their system, it'll self-replicate. It will spread. They won't be able to contain it. He finally looked at me. "Good luck, Jake." I slipped the chip into my pocket. It felt impossibly heavy. I walked through the silent streets toward the hub. It was a dome-shaped building in the center of town, glowing with a soft internal light. It looked like a temple. My temple. I had worked there for years, a loyal priest of the New Age. Now I was returning as a heretic, a bomber. My old keycard still worked on the front door. The Lumininians hadn't bothered to deactivate it. Why would they? Who would ever want to break into a place that only offered peace? Inside, the air was cool and humming with power. The main chamber was empty. A large circular room with connection pods lining the walls. In the center, a column of light pulsed from floor to ceiling. This was the central server, the heart of the beast. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I walked to a maintenance terminal, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I slid my keycard and my access code still worked. A menu appeared on the screen. Welcome, Technician Miller. I felt a sudden, powerful psychic pull. The chorus was aware of me. It wasn't an alarm, not yet. It was a welcome, Jacob. You have returned. You are in pain. Your head aches. Let us help you. Let us soothe you. A memory flooded my mind unbidden. Sarah on our honeymoon beach. But this time it was perfect. Her face was crystal clear, beautiful, smiling. Her laugh was the melodious, perfect laugh from the premium experience. This can be yours, Jacob, the chorus whispered. Forever, no pain, no loss, just this, just peace. It was a siren song, a promise of an end to all my struggles. For a second, I wavered. My hand hovered over the Initiate Therapeutic Session button. It would be so easy. Then, I remembered the yellow hat, the real, goofy, ridiculous yellow hat. No, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I pulled the chip from my pocket and jammed it into the data port. Immediately, the atmosphere in the room changed. The welcoming presence vanished, replaced by a feeling of immense cold pressure. Alarms blared on the screen in a language of light and symbols I didn't understand. The column of light in the center of the room turned a violent, angry red. Unauthorized data signature. Detected. Purge protocol initiated. Come on, Ben, I muttered, watching the progress bar on the screen. The upload was agonizingly slow. 10%, 20%. The pressure in my head was unbearable. It was the Luminian, or 1,000 of them, all focusing on this one spot. On me. It was trying to break me, to crush my will. Images flashed through my mind. Lily crying for me, my house on fire, my own death over and over. Fear, pure, weaponized fear. I gritted my teeth, squeezed my eyes shut, and focused. I didn't think of Sarah on the beach. I thought of her in the hospital bed. I forced myself to remember every detail. The pale color of her skin, the dry rasp of her breathing, the feeling of her hand growing cold in mine. I held on to the pain. It was my shield. It was my sword. It was real. 40%, 50%. The lights in the hub flickered and died. Marcus, the blackout. The physical alarms went silent, but the psychic assault intensified. The red column of light pulsed violently. I could feel the system fighting back, trying to isolate and eject the alien data packet. 70%, 80%. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I flinched, crying out. But it wasn't a Luminian. It was Sheriff Brody, his face pale in the red emergency light, a heavy shotgun in his hands. Figured you might need some backup, he said, his voice grim. Got a call about a disturbance at the power station. Then I saw the lights go out here. Put 2 and 2 together. 90%, 95%. The main doors of the hub slid open. A Luminian stood there, silhouetted against the dim streetlights. It wasn't shimmering this time. The light around it was jagged, angry. The air crackled with its fury. You cannot comprehend what you are doing. The voice of a billion enraged gods screamed in our heads. You are choosing chaos. You are choosing pain. We're choosing, Brody grunted, raising the shotgun. That's the point. 100% upload complete. Data packet dispersed. The red column of light flashed white, a blinding, silent explosion that threw us both back. The psychic pressure vanished, replaced by something else. A single, pure, high-frequency note that I felt in my bones. It was the sound of a billion minds, all screaming at once. The memory was loose. The virus was in the system. The Trojan horse was finally open. The scream lasted only a moment, but it felt like an eternity. It was a sound that was not a sound, a psychic shockwave that radiated out from the hub, through the town, across the planet. In that single instant, every man, woman, and child connected to the chorus was slammed with the undiluted, uncurated truth of our weaponized memory. They felt the terror of Marcus's war, the grit of sand in their teeth, the deafening explosion, the gurgling cry of a dying friend. They felt the cavernous grief of Eleanor's loss, the suffocating weight of a world without a loved one. They felt the bitter, acid betrayal that Ben had known, the discovery of a comfortable lie, and they felt my loss. They held Sarah's cold hand with me. They smelled the sterile finality of the hospital room. They felt the piece of my soul that had been carved out forever. They felt pain, real, messy, unfiltered human pain. The luminion in the doorway convulsed, the light around it fractured like shattered glass. The harmonious voice in our heads splintered into 1,000 shrieking, terrified pieces. Discordance, contagion, system integrity compromised. It was feeling it too. It was feeling our chaos, and the perfect, serene machine of its consciousness could not process it. With a final, silent shriek that tore at the edges of my sanity, it dissolved into a shower of dying motes of light. Silence. A real, true silence fell over Harmony Creek. Not the empty silence of the unplugged house, but the stunned silence, after a great and terrible noise. Sheriff Brody and I picked ourselves up from the floor. My head was ringing, but the dull ache of the chorus and the sharp pain of its withdrawal were both gone. For the first time in a decade, my mind felt completely and utterly my own. We stumbled outside. The world was waking up. Lights were flicking on in houses. Doors were opening. People were wandering into their yards, their faces etched with confusion, horror, and a terrifying dawning awareness. A man across the street was on his knees, weeping. A woman was holding her head, staring at her hands as if she'd never seen them before. The placid, serene glow was gone from their eyes. It was replaced by the beautiful, terrible light of consciousness. What? What did I just see? Mrs. Gable from next door whispered, her face ashen. My son. I remember my son. Not the chorus memory, the real one. He died in the Eastern Wars. I remember his funeral. It rained. She started to cry. Not the gentle, therapeutic tears of the chorus, but ragged, ugly sobs of a grief she hadn't been allowed to feel for 10 years. It was happening everywhere. The psychic bomb had shattered the great illusion. It had reminded them not just of pain, but of everything that came with it. It reminded them of real love, the kind that hurts when it's gone. It reminded them of real history, written in blood and sacrifice, not in harmonious prose. The holes in their minds were being filled, not with Luminian filler, but with their own stolen lives. rushing back in a painful, overwhelming flood. The great forgetting was over. The great remembering had begun. It was not a victory celebration. It was the morning after a long drunken stupor. It was chaos. It was anguish. Humanity had been given a peace it hadn't earned, and the price of waking up was to feel the full weight of a decade's worth of buried trauma all at once. I ran home. The streets were filled with dazed and crying people. I found Lily in the living room, curled up in a ball, shaking. I gathered her into my arms. "Daddy," she cried, I saw scary things in my head." "I know, sweetie, I know." I soothed her, holding her tight. "It's over now, the bad dream is over." I looked out the window at the town, at the world that was being reborn in agony. The Luminians' Trojan horse of Oblivion had failed. We had not been hollowed out. We had not been erased. We had remembered. The cost was immense. The peace was shattered. Old wounds were reopened. Old conflicts would likely reignite. The future was a terrifying, uncertain void. The Luminians, or whatever was left of them, would not take this defeat lying down. A real war might be coming. A war fought with ships and weapons, not just with memories. But as I held my daughter, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Sarah died. Hope. A fierce, difficult, painful hope. We were messy. We were flawed. We were a symphony of screams. But we were human again, and we were free. Whatever came next, we would face it with our eyes wide open, remembering everything, especially the rain.